Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by the Coalition for Global Hearing Health, Family and Community Empowerment Committee. Today's topic is Global Perspectives on Family-Centered Early Intervention for Deaf Children. We are holding the webinar this week to mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is tomorrow, the 3rd of December. So my name is Liz Seidel, and I am the head of policy at Deaf Child Worldwide, which is part of the United Kingdom-based National Deaf Children's Society. Deaf Child Worldwide works with low and middle income countries to set up sustainable, universal newborn hearing screening and early intervention programs. And we support deaf children with any level of hearing loss. I co-chair the Family and Community Empowerment Committee alongside Dr. Selvarani Moodley of the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, who is on the call with us today. I'm so excited to introduce our wonderful speakers and hear what they have to say. But first, I do need to cover a few housekeeping items. So I do want to introduce our international sign interpreters, Andy and Marzan, and our live captioner, Maria. If you are using the interpreters, you can pin them. If you need multi-pin, please ask in the chat, and my colleague staff will give you access. And if you need to turn on English captions, please click CC Show Subtitles. We ask that you keep your camera off, and please keep yourself on mute so that everyone can hear the presenters clearly. And please ask any questions in the chat box. We have dedicated time after everyone has spoken to answer as many questions as possible. If you would like to sign your question, please turn on your camera during the Q&A session, and we'll be happy to facilitate this. And please do ensure your username reflects the name you signed up to the webinar with. You can amend your name by clicking on the 3 dots over the image. We can't send you post-event information if we can't identify you as having attended the webinar. And if you're applying for CPD accreditation, please be sure to fill out the feedback form that we will share. And if you need tech support, please message Steph or pop your message into the chat and we will help. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Ian Noon, the strategy lead for National Deaf Children's Society based in the United Kingdom. Ian is going to introduce us to the family-centered early intervention principles and the FCEI principles within the UK context. So Ian, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you all today. So, as Liz said, I'm going to give a summary of the FCEI principles. I'll give a whistle-stop tour. So, what are the principles? So, they're a set of evidence-based statements that have been agreed by families, researchers, and professionals, and written up by a panel of experts. Those experts have been drawn from across the world, and they include, for example, the Global Coalition of Parents of Children who are Deaf or Hard of Hearing, or GPOD. So the principles were first published back in 2013, and then they were updated and republished last year. So the updated version now includes more input from families and from deaf leaders. Also incorporates the latest evidence published over the last 10 to 12 years. And it also has a broader international and cultural perspectives within it. So you can find the principles on the FCEI website and also in the Journal of Deaf Studies and Deaf Education. In that journal, there are about 8 articles about the principles. One of the principles sets out the guiding values which is a really good place to start if you're not familiar with the principles. There's also another article on cultural and global implications, and then the articles go on to talk about each of the principles. And on this slide here, there's a key quote that for me really sums up well the FCI principles. And I'll give you a moment just to read that. Now, when I'm talking about the FCI principle, there's a few key points that I always emphasize. Firstly, for me, the principles are an approach and a mindset. What it isn't is a program or a product that you just pick up and take anywhere. It's a way of thinking about how to support families. And one of the kind of key things, a part of that mindset, is that real focus on collaboration with families and collaborative relationships. If you go back, sorry, Steph. And these relationships are about making sure that support is provided with families rather than to families. So professionals and families working side by side. It's also a strength-based model rather than a deficit model, meaning it's a focus on what the deaf child and the family can do rather than what they can't do. And there's a real focus throughout on family choices, control, and capacity. Next slide, please. So in a moment, I'll go through each of the principles. First thing to say is that the principles, there's 10 of them, and they are grouped into 3 categories. We have the foundation principles, which are those core underlying principles. We have the support principles, which is around support to families and deaf children. And then we have the structure principles, which are about making sure that the systems and the structures are working well to enable the principles. And in the journal, each principle is accompanied by a discussion about what it means, as well as the evidence that underpins it. The journal also sets out some recommendations for early intervention providers, for family activities, and recommendations for the wider systems around early intervention. The next slide, please. So I'll go very quickly through each of the principles. The first principle is around early identification and early intervention. And the focus there is on early, timely, and equitable provision of support, with the aim of preventing delayed or insufficient access to language and really optimizing the development in the critical early years. Equitable support in this context is meant in a broad sense around making sure that all service options are available to families, whilst recognizing that some of the wider inequalities that may exist in society, whilst also recognizing that every family is unique and will have different needs. Second principle around family provider relationships is around forming those effective collaborative partnerships, working collaboratively and flexibly, and working to build family capacity and confidence. Next slide, please. And then we go on to the support principles. So principle 3 is around family support, and that's about recognizing basic needs, strengths and challenges within the family, and how to help the family adjust to deafness. It's also about helping the family to develop connections, both with other families, but also with deaf adults. Principle 4 is around child well-being, and that covers things like development, well-being, and safeguarding. Principle 5 covers language and communication, and the focus there is around early and consistent access to language and creating a rich language environment in the home, regardless of which language approach that the family might choose, spoken or sign language. Principle 6 is around family decisions, and that's around how we support families to help them become confident, competent, and informed decision makers, whilst also recognizing again the different perspectives and backgrounds of families. The next slide, please. These cover the structure principles. So principle 7 is around the need for skilled and competent early intervention professionals. And here we're talking about competency in relation to deafness, but also in relation to early intervention. And here there's a real strong focus again on the value of trained professionals who have lived experience, either because they are families of deaf children or because they are deaf adults. Principle 8 builds on this to emphasize the importance of teamwork across professionals and bringing together professionals who have that experience in deafness and early intervention. Principle 9 is around assessments, and here the principle stresses the importance of working with families to carry out any assessments of deaf children and making sure that there's shared goal setting with the family. And then finally, we have Principle 10, progress monitoring. And this here is about the importance of data and tracking outcomes to reassure ourselves that the system is working well. And it's about tracking data and outcomes both at an individual level, individual deaf children, but also outcomes across the whole service. Is the service working well? I'm just going to talk a little bit about the FCEI principles in the UK. So, at the National Deaf Children Society and Deaf Child Worldwide, as a parent-led organisation, the principles are really important for us. So, we've used them to kind of think about areas of development within the UK or areas where potentially we're not doing as well as we could be. And so, from my personal perspective, some of the challenges we have in the UK are around early identification and consistency and making sure that that's working well across the whole of the UK. In terms of collaborative working, I think most professionals that I come across in the UK do have that genuine commitment to working with families and being family-centred. But perhaps I might need more support on training about how to actually achieve that in practice and to make that support work for individual families, regardless of their different needs, to basically tailor their support. In terms of early intervention teams, I think there's a debate to be had within the UK about what the composition of those teams should look like. I think one of my personal reflections is that sometimes we may have got hung up on job titles, on job descriptions, rather than focusing on what exactly is the competency, the skill that we need within the team to meet the needs of families. In terms of deaf professionals, I think it's fair to say that they're not as well established in the early intervention pathway as we would like it to be. And then finally, data within the UK on deaf children's outcomes and the progress that deaf children make is weak. Government data is patchy or non-existent. And the different data systems that we have don't really link up or talk to each other. The next slide, please. So going back to the FCI principles, in the journal that I mentioned earlier, there's a section on a call to action. I won't go through them all, but 4 call to actions that I would highlight here. So Firstly, the call to action to implement the principles and to work with policymakers, families, and deaf adults in your area to do that. And the SCI network is always really interested to learn from people around the world about how that's being done. But there's a second call to action and then building the capacity of professionals, making sure they have the training that they need. Research, the principles are evidence-led, but more research is always valuable to make sure we're addressing any gaps and to make them even stronger. And then finally, and most importantly, we have to make sure there's a focus always on outcomes and delivering value for deaf children and families, making sure that the principles are working well for them. And that's it for me. I'm very happy to take any questions in the chat or later on towards the end, but I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ian. If you have questions for Ian, you can either put them in the chat now, or you can save them for the Q&A session. So I'm now so pleased to introduce Tunukshi Eleperuma, a senior lecturer in audiology and a clinical audiologist at the University of Kalyana in Sri Lanka. She is going to present her findings on the impact and cost effectiveness of family-centered early intervention for deaf children. So thank you, Tunukshi.
Thank you, Liz. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dinukshi Leperuma from Sri Lanka. So this is my topic for today. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So I have no financial or non-financial relationships to disclose. Next slide. So let's look at the background of this study. Early intervention makes a huge difference for children with hearing loss, as we know. And research shows that, that when hearing loss is identified early and support begins immediately, children have a significant better chance of developing strong language and communication skills. It really sets the foundation for their learning and social development. And another big piece in this role is the family. Families are not just involved, they are essential partners. When parents understand how to support listening and language development during everyday routines like while you are playing with the child, or when you are reading with the child, or during bathing time, or just talking at home, it can have a significant impact. Strong communication between families and professionals helps make sure strategies actually fit the child's life. However, even with what we know, significant gaps remain, particularly in low-resource settings. Many places lack consistent newborn hearing screenings, access to hearing technology, and enough trained professionals. These barriers can delay diagnosis and limit a child's opportunities, thereby improving access to and support for children with hearing loss is very important to ensure that all children can reach their full potential. Next slide, please. So through this study, we aim to evaluate the impact of family-centered habilitation by looking at two main outcomes. These were improvements in children's auditory and language development and increases in parental self-efficacy. We also looked at the feasibility of a hybrid low-cost delivery model, especially for families who have limited access to traditional services. Next slide, please. So now let's look at the methodology we used in this study. So this was a qualitative study which was done at a university audiology clinic with 30 families of children between the age, up to 6 years who had bilateral severe to profound hearing loss. families were then assigned to either standard care, which was the control group, or a 10-week family-centered intervention. So that was the intervention group. This program used a hybrid delivery model combining in-person sessions with WhatsApp support. Next slide, please. So the intervention program included a weekly 60 to 90-minute in-person session, plus asynchronous WhatsApp support for any questions, to share videos, or for reminders. And this was delivered by audiologists and speech and language pathologists and trained parent mentors. The program focused on giving caregivers actionable tools and emotional support. Accessibility was key. We used common technology and tailored content to families' daily realities. Next slide, please. So here you see the structure of the 10-week family-centered habilitation program we used, which delivered a significant topic per week to each family. So there are 10 topics which was carried out through 10 weeks. Next slide, please. Both child development and parent confidence were measured pre and post intervention, and we combined standardized assessments like the integrated scales of development, and also we did use parent interviews for a holistic understanding. And there were the paired t-test and the Wilcoxon sign rank test, which was used to analyze the quantitative data. Next slide, please. Significant gains in auditory, receptive, and expressive language were observed in the intervention group, whereas the control group showed minimal improvements. The intervention group saw clear improvements in multiple developmental areas, while parents also reported feeling more capable and involved. Next slide, please. So in this bar chart, it's shown that the pre and post improvement in developmental skills between the intervention and the control group. So you can see a clear increase in scores in the intervention group. Next slide, please. So here we see the increased self-efficacy scores in communication and hearing aid management. Next slide, please. So in this figure, it's shown that the improvement in parental self-efficacy is more in the intervention, the post-intervention scores. Next slide, please. The qualitative findings were analyzed through thematic analysis, and we saw that parents spoke positively about their involvement and growth, though they also highlighted some challenges, especially balancing the training with daily responsibilities, because they had other children who were hearing. So it was difficult for them to, balance, have a, balance between work. And also they reported limited tech access. Next slide, please. So this program completion rate was 90%. So it was 9 out of 10 families who completed the 10-week program. So there was one family who dropped out because of a illness in the family. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the study suggests that empowering families can drive meaningful change, even in resource-constrained environments. So this low-cost, scalable model could be adapted in various settings, worldwide. Next slide, please. So looking at the implications for practice, this model provides a low-cost and scalable approach to empowering families in early hearing intervention, making it practical for low and middle income settings. It works well with community health workers and public health systems, improving access and long-term sustainability. The approach is also highly adaptable, easily tailored to different languages and cultural contexts. So this allows families to use strategies that fit their daily lives and traditions. Next slide, please. So these are the references, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Shirukshi. And again, you can put questions in the chat or you can save them for our Q&A session at the end. So our last speaker is Alex Msichana, based in South Africa. She is a deaf disability inclusion advocate, social entrepreneur, and founder and CEO of the Deaf Empowerment Firm, which drives economic pathways for deaf youth through skills development, workplace exposure, and inclusive employment models. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much for also putting my screen up. Thank you for that. Good evening, everyone. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for creating the space for deaf voices. My name is Alex Msichana, as Liz has said, and my pronouns are she, her. Before I begin, I'd like to locate myself properly. I wear many hats in the disability sector and board chair, advisor in the presidency, policy voice, activist, and many more. But today, I'm speaking in my most important role as founder and CEO of the Deaf Empowerment Firm and executive director of the Deaf Empowerment Foundation, and also as a deaf woman whose advocacy is rooted in economic justice. For me, deaf advocacy is not just about access to interpreters or information alone. It is about access to income, because without income, there's no independence. Without independence, there's no dignity. So this evening, I want to share my lived experience and how it opened my eyes to the work we do at the Deaf Empowerment Firm for deaf children and deaf youth in South Africa, and why our advocacy must go beyond awareness into economic empowerment. And that journey started with something very personal. Next slide, please. I was not born deaf. I lost my hearing in the year 2007 at the age of 40, right in the middle of a flourishing career. I had more than 10 years of strong professional experience at that time in 2007. A university qualification, a good CV, stability. And then almost overnight, all that meant nothing. People stopped seeing my skills, my qualifications, my professional track record. All they saw was my hearing loss. It was the first time in my life that I became unemployable, not because my ability disappeared or diminished, but because the system had no idea what to do with someone like me. And here's the part that connects to deaf children. What I experienced suddenly at age 40, many deaf children experience from the moment they start school or even before they start school, with a world that does not know how to include them, systems that are not built for their inclusion. My turning point came when an organization for the deaf gave me a chance. They didn't try to fix me. They trusted me, saw my capability, and gave me employment. That opportunity led to me working with deaf youth. And that's when I realized what happens to me as an adult was happening to them before they even reach age 20. And that is when my advocacy for deaf children and youth began. But my journey doesn't start at that youth stage. The real problem begins much earlier. Next slide, please. Before deaf youth even reach the labor market, deaf children are already facing barriers that shape their entire future. Many attend schools without accessible language. They encounter low expectations from educators. They deal with delayed language exposure. They are often isolated in classrooms designed for hearing children, or they have educators not qualified to deliver the curriculum in their language, which is South African Sign Language. So by the time they become teenagers, exclusion has already taken root. Their confidence is low, their opportunities are limited, their dreams have been shaped by systems that communicate the horrid message that you are not expected to succeed. And this matters because every unemployment deaf adult was once a deaf child failed by the system. So when we speak about advocacy for deaf children, we are speaking about building their future opportunities, not fixing their present barriers. And that failure becomes even more visible during the transition from school into adulthood. Next slide, please. As I worked with deaf youth, a pattern became very clear. Deaf young people are not unemployed because they can't work. They are unemployed because the system has no bridge for them. There are almost no accessible internship opportunities for deaf youth because deaf children in South Africa often don't obtain the diplomas and degrees required as entry requirements into these internships. There is no inclusive entry pathways into workplace, and very few young deaf people have had exposure to professional environments. Employers often say, we want to hire deaf people, but we don't know how. And deaf youth say, we want to work, but no one will give us the real chance. So they fall into a painful cycle, no job, no experience, no job. So that cycle is very painful one for our deaf young people. This broken transition from childhood exclusion to youth unemployment became the center of our work at DEF. And that's what led to us designing a practical solution. Next slide, please. That's how our workplace exposure program began at DEF. We stopped waiting for inclusion to arrive. We engineered it. We placed deaf youth into real work environments, not to observe, not to tick a CSIR box, but to contribute. They do the work, they gain real experience, they build confidence, and employers get to see and experience deaf talent directly. And something shifts when we start doing that. Deafness stops being a risk. It becomes a difference. It empowers employers and employers start seeing capability. In our 2019 pilot, over 50 participants were absorbed into employment, into permanent jobs. But here's the painful truth once again. This program has not been scaled nationally, not because it doesn't work, but because deaf-led solutions are not being taken seriously or funded adequately. We don't need more research proving deaf capability. We need investment in models that already work. And through the years, we've learned exactly what it takes to design a real inclusion. Next slide, please. One thing we have learned over the years is this: inclusion does not happen by chance. It has to be intentionally designed. At DEF, our starting point has always been simple. Deaf youth are not the problem. The environment in which they are is the problem. So when we prepare deaf youth for the world of work, it's never just technical training alone. We prepare them emotionally, professionally, and socially for environments that were not built for them in mind. But here's the truth that we had to confront early on. Even the most prepared young person will struggle in a workplace that is not prepared for them. So our advocacy model works both sides. We prepare the employers as well. We help them understand communication access. We guide them on how to supervise deaf staff effectively. We help them redesign simple processes that remove everyday barriers. We don't just place our deaf candidates and disappear. We walk, the journey with both the employer and the candidate. We intervene, we mediate, we troubleshoot, and we support, because we are not aiming just for placement. Placement is easy. Sustained employment, growth, and dignity. That's the real work. And when inclusion is designed intentionally, when environments shift even just a little bit, you begin to see deaf talent unfolding in ways that remind you what is possible. Let me share with you exactly what the transformative work looks like. I want to share a real story, one that shows what happens when inclusion moves from theory into practice. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce you to someone who represents the heart of the work that we do at DF. Her name is Dandos. She joined our placement program as a deaf candidate in a cleaning support role at a hotel south of Johannesburg. She wasn't in a glamorous role. She wasn't placed as a symbol of inclusion. She simply wanted a chance to work and contribute and grow. And because the environment was inclusive, because supervisors were trained through our sensitization program, because communication access was provided through our guidance and support services, and because she was supported rather than sidelined by her employer, something powerful happened in that workplace. Her leadership showed up, her confidence grew, her team started to look at her, to look towards her for guidance. Her potential became visible, and that led to her promotion, the first deaf person to be promoted in that organization. Today, she is a cleaning supervisor at the hotel, leading teams, solving problems, and showing the hospitality sector exactly what deaf leadership looks like. Not because of pity, not because the employer wanted to tick a compliance box, not because she was given promotion. She earned that promotion because the environment finally allowed her ability to be seen. Dandos is not the exception. She is the evidence. Evidence that when you remove barriers, deaf people rise. Evidence that when inclusion is intentional, talent becomes impossible to ignore. Evidence that deaf children grow into deaf leaders when systems finally get out of their way. That is what real inclusion looks like. Not just a job, but progression, dignity, and visibility. And yet, while we see these transformations, the system is still repeating old mistakes. And this brings me to an uncomfortable truth about training and development. Next slide, please. Now, while Danos' story gives hope, I also want to be honest about a very worrying pattern we're seeing in South Africa. We are investing heavily in training, especially through CETAs, CSI budgets, and skill development levies. On paper, it all looks so fantastic and wonderful. We produce large numbers of trained people, many programs delivered, lots of skills and certificates issued. But here's the truth once again. We are running a large-scale skills programs without no exits. Young people finish training and then thereafter, nothing. No structured pathways into work, no support transition to self-employment, no bridge to real income participation. So we end up with exactly this. Certificates do not equal livelihoods. In the deaf community, we feel this very sharply. Let me use our deaf software developers as an example. When we started that journey, people said to us, deaf people can't code. It's too complex. Industry won't accept them. We proved them wrong. They completed their training with us successfully, 100% completion rate and 95% success rate. Those are unprecedented results, and they are skilled, capable, and ready. But the next step, the step that turns training into income, is where the system disappears. We are trying to establish an ICT innovation hub so that these deaf developers don't just leave with certificates, but with a place to work, to build products, to earn an income. And yet that critical phase, the transition into income, is the one that remains underfunded. So my warning is this: If we keep funding training without funding what comes next, we are not solving unemployment. We are simply delaying it. And for deaf children who grow up, become deaf youth, and then deaf adults, this training trap just repeats the same old story of inclusion in a new format. That's why for me, advocacy is not just about asking for more training. It's about demanding pathways, real funded deaf-led pathways into work and enterprise. Next slide, please. Now I want to bring everything together in a very clear message about where investment needs to go. For too long, deaf advocacy has been at the level of awareness and access and visibility. And yes, those things are very important. They matter and they're very important. But access without economic participation still leaves deaf people dependent. If you want to change the life of a deaf child, if you want to change the trajectory of deaf youth, we must invest in economic futures, not just educational outcomes. And that starts with one principle: support deaf-led solutions, not solutions designed for us, but solutions built by deaf people. Because deaf-led models understand our realities, our barriers, and our pathways. The second piece, which is crucial, fund the bridge from training to income. Most funders stop at the training stage. That's the easy part. The hard part, the part that changes lives, is resourcing the phase where skills become livelihoods. That's the phase that's always underfunded. And that's the phase deaf youth desperately need. The third point, prioritize sustainability, not short-term outputs. A certificate is not an output. Employment is an outcome. Income is transition and transformation. If funding focuses only on activities and long-term opportunity, we miss the entire purpose of inclusion. And finally, build with us, not for us. We don't need system designed on our behalf. We need partnerships that build deaf people at the table, that puts deaf people at the table, leading, shaping, and owning those solutions. If we can shift investment path into pathways, into deaf-led, deaf-designed, deaf-driven economic futures, then the deaf children we're advocating for today will grow up with choices, with dignity, and with independence. That is what real advocacy looks like. And that is what the many potential to participation is from training into income. And as I conclude, next slide, please. For too long, deaf advocacy has been about proving that deaf people are capable. We already know that we are. The real question is whether our systems, employers, and institutions are willing to evolve fast enough to meet that capability. Deaf advocacy can't stop at access. It must lead to action, to income, to leadership, to ownership. If you want better outcomes for deaf youth, we must start with better outcomes for deaf children. So yes, train us. Yes, include us. Yes, make your spaces accessible. But most importantly, build with us, not around us, not above us, but with us. Deaf people are not waiting to be included. We are already building futures. My deaf software developers are already starting to develop projects and products in the ICT space. And my advocacy is at best, it's about finally removing barriers so that we can thrive, the barriers that keep slowing us down, dismantling them and putting them aside so that our talent and capabilities can shine through. So I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Thank you for the opportunity to present this story and to present the work that we are doing in DF to be able to empower our young deaf children, our young deaf adults, so they could be empowered and highly active. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you. And then thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. So we will now open the floor to audience questions. If you would like to ask a question or if you would like to sign a question, please turn your camera on and raise your hand, and please say your name before you speak. I think there's been some good conversation in the chat, and that's been wonderful to see. And I think there's some good connections being made in the chat too, which is great. I'm going to start with Dr. Gale, who I saw online in Geneva at the Disability Health Equity Network and who I owe an email to, so I'm really pleased to see her. So if you would like to start with your question, that would be great.
Okay, sorry. I'm really happy for this webinar because it's opened a lot of perspectives for me. I am Dr. Gael Vofo. I'm an ENT surgeon from Cameroon and the founder and president of an organization called Shomea. And what we do in Cameroon is that we founded a model for screening of hearing and vision in newborn babies. And this has been amazing, changing lives. And so that's what we've been doing. Now we're trying to move the screening model to elementary schools. So my question is for Ms. Alex, who just spoke. I'm a little bit frustrated at the reaction that we get at times from people living with hearing disabilities in Cameroon. They have a phrase that they say, nothing for deaf people without deaf people. And this is a little bit frustrating because we have programs that we develop, like we got a donation of hearing aids and we went to a deaf community wanting to screen and donate the hearing aids, and we met with resistance because for them, they felt that we had something else to gain. And that statement came up. So I was wondering if you have an insight for me to like encourage me and my team to keep up with such projects, or if you have ideas on how we can approach such communities with the help that we have. Thank you.
Alex, did you want to go ahead and answer that first before we move on to another question? I'm just waiting for Alex to come on camera. Maybe we can take another question, and then when Alex comes back on, she can respond to that one. Oh, there she is. Alex, go ahead.
I was trying to navigate my captions there between the two screens that I have on my screen. Thank you so much for the question. And indeed, navigating the hearing world becomes quite daunting and quite exhausting for young deaf people because there are so many barriers that they face. And as I shared the examples of what the work that we do at the Deaf Empowerment Firm, you know, when we send our young deaf people into workplaces, we have to start at the point of sensitizing the employers to ensure that the environment is ready for them when they come through. And then we have the issue of interpreter fees that employers complain that interpreters are too expensive for them to bring to workplaces. But we're saying also to employers, there are ways of navigating that issues. Interpreters are important for deaf people to have in the workplace so that they can be able to navigate the workplace. But we do that at the point of sensitization. So that when they arrive, the organization already is prepared on how to bring them through. And to navigate the issue of interpreters, there are innovations that have happened in the deaf space, wonderful innovations that deaf innovators have come up with, apps that can be used in the workplaces to ensure that communication happens seamlessly. But still there, you still meet barriers where employers don't want to invest in these assistive technologies. And we're saying to them, the advocacy that we're pushing is that These assistive technologies are there to help navigate the very challenges that employers are speaking about the expenses of interpreters into the workplaces. So it's a dual kind of struggle that we are battling with, where we have to look at these budget constraints and we have to fight and say budgets can't be used as a tool to exclude our young deaf people. Then we're providing them with solutions, but they will still meet with resistance when we want to introduce assistive technologies to assist them. So it's that dual kind of barrier and struggle that we're faced with. But that's where our advocacy strengthens, and we keep pushing that our young deaf people come into these workplaces and they're provided with the employment that they need so that we restore their dignity. And we work with the employers. Some are willing, some are not willing, but our advocacy goes on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. And I see Catherine has her hand up. So Catherine, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I'm from Kenya. I'm here on behalf of myself as a parent to a deaf child. He's right here. Say hi. Hi, everyone. So he uses a cochlear implant and to hear and sign language. And I'm also here on behalf of Nancy from Lugha Ishara, who couldn't be here. And I wanted to respond from the lady doctor in Cameroon, given experiences that have happened in Lugha Ishara or feedback that was given to Nancy. Her question sparked sparked something that I'd had previously Nancy talk about, and from parents as well. So in the beginning of Lugha Ishara, Lugha Ishara is an organization that seeks to end language deprivation. That's the core of it, but then it evolves into so much more: parental empowerment, caregiver empowerment, just the whole process from intervention to thriving in raising your deaf child. But I remember in the beginning, Nancy, as the leader or the co-founder, came up with an app that was supposed to help deaf children learn sign language. And it was amazing, and it was all of these things that an app should be. But and so there was a baby signing competition where we met, and parents were giving feedback, were supposed to give feedback on the app. And everything the parents said was, the app is great, we love it, but what we really need is community. We want to meet other parents, we want support, we want to hear stories of hope. So the thing is, maybe to the lady doctor from Cameroon, I'm sorry, I forget your name, but it's to develop or create whatever you're creating collaboratively with the deaf people. Do not go and create a solution and bring it to them. Speak to them, find out what it is that they need or they desire, and then build around that. Because even I, as a parent, and who is in the seat, who is in the car, driving the car of navigating hearing loss, I am, at the end of the day, I am not a deaf person, and I can never understand what it means to be a deaf person. For now, I may speak on his behalf and give the answers as to what I think he needs, but at the end of the day, he needs to speak for himself. And so that's where advocacy comes in. And I'm really glad to hear, and now just quickly moving on to the presenter who said that when you have intervention, parents are able to advocate for themselves more. Yeah, Dr. Gael, I see you commenting. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. Yes, so that was to Dr. Gael and to the other, the research that was done that shows that parents are actually able to advocate for themselves more. You can tell a parent where intervention has worked by the way they're able to speak up and intervene and advocate for their child. Yeah. So to Dr. Gael, work with the deaf people. They have the solutions. Create the solutions collaboratively, and you'll be sure to go far. Remember, the solutions are with the deaf people. They are not with us hearing people. Yeah, so that's it, Elizabeth, and to everyone, thank you for organizing these things. And to Ian, the FCEI principles are just amazing, and I hope one day Kenya will get to the point where we are actually implementing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some really powerful interventions. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Catherine, for that. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I think this conversation could go on and on. So I do want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. I want to thank you to our wonderful speakers, and also thank you to our wonderful interpreters and captioners, and thank you for everyone who added to the conversation in the chat and then with questions as well. And then a great big thank you to my CGHH committee co-chair, Dr. Moodley. And as a reminder on that, if you are attending for CBD credit, please do fill out the survey that Dr. Moodley put in the chat. And then please feel free to also contact us about future ideas for webinar topics. I am putting my email in the chat to receive your feedback as well. And I do just want to end with a call to action. So if you are a member of the Coalition on Global Hearing Health, I do encourage you to join the Family and Community Empowerment Committee. We do work on things like this webinar, and we're starting to collate resources for family empowerment to identify gaps and to see where we can move the needle. And we would just love for you to be a part of that. Our next committee meeting is in January, and then you can contact me for more information about that. So with that, I will close out, and then thank you to everyone. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.